Ma'am, can you stop for a moment?
Yes, officer. Is everything okay?
What are you doing in this neighborhood?
I live here. I'm walking my dog. We take the same walk every day.
You live in this neighborhood? In one of these houses?
Picture this. You're standing on your own street, the street where you've lived for 7 years. The house behind you? Yours? The mortgage? Paid on time. Every single month. The dog sitting calmly beside you? Yours too. A sweet golden retriever who wouldn't hurt a fly. And then a police officer walks up to you and asks, "What are you doing in this neighborhood?" Not, "Can I help you?" Not, "Good afternoon." But, "What are you doing here?" As if you're a stranger, as if you don't belong, as if the color of your skin makes you suspicious in the very place you call home. This is the true story of Dr. Tamara Wallace. And what happened next would lead to a $1 million lawsuit, a terminated police career, and federal intervention in an entire police department. All because she took her dog for a walk. Before we dive in, drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. And if you believe people should be able to walk in their own neighborhoods without being questioned, hit that subscribe button right now. Let me tell you about Tamara. She was 51 years old, a principal. Not just any principal, she led Northside High School, one of the highest performing public schools in New York. She had a doctorate in educational leadership. She was respected, accomplished, dedicated. But more than that, she had worked for everything she had. She earned her bachelor's degree while working full-time as a teaching assistant. Imagine that. Classes during the day, work in the evening, studying late into the night. Then came her master's degree, which she completed while raising 2 children, alone, as a single mother. Balancing homework with her kids' homework. Balancing their needs with her dreams. And even that wasn't enough for her. She went back for her doctorate, while working as a vice principal, writing her dissertation in stolen moments between meetings, between phone calls, between the chaos of running a school. She didn't just want success, she earned it. Line by line, page by page, year by year, and with that success, she bought a home. A beautiful home in Willowbrook, a quiet suburban neighborhood in Westchester County, New York. Tree-lined streets, mature oak trees that created canopies of shade in the summer, well-maintained homes with manicured lawns, good schools, safe streets, the kind of neighborhood where people knew their neighbors, where kids rode bikes on the sidewalks, where life felt peaceful. Tamara had lived there for 7 years. She paid her property taxes. She contributed to the community. She even served on the neighborhood association board. She organized block parties. She showed up. She belonged. And yet, it was a Tuesday afternoon. Nothing special. Nothing dramatic. Tamara had taken the day off for a routine doctor's appointment. Just a checkup. She drove home around 2:30, changed into comfortable clothes, jeans, a sweater, and decided to take her dog Charlie for a walk. Charlie, a 6-year-old golden retriever. Friendly, well-trained, the kind of dog that wagged his tail at everyone. They walked the same route they always took, around the block, past familiar houses. The same walk they'd done hundreds of times before. And then they turned onto their own street. That's when the police car pulled up. Officer Jason Miller stepped out. 29 years old, 3 years on the force, and he had just received a call about a suspicious person in the neighborhood. The caller, a neighbor 2 streets over, had reported seeing a black woman walking through the neighborhood who didn't look like she belonged there. That was it. That was the entire report. A black woman who didn't look like she belonged. So when Officer Miller saw Tamara walking Charlie, he decided she must be the one. "Ma'am, can you stop for a moment?" Tamara stopped, turned around. Charlie sat down beside her, tail wagging. "Yes, officer. Is everything okay?" And then came the question that would change everything. What are you doing in this neighborhood? Let that sink in for a moment. What are you doing in this neighborhood? Not, do you live nearby? Not, can I help you with something? But, what are you doing here? As if she were trespassing, as if she were out of place, as if her presence itself required explanation. Tamara felt it like a slap, but she kept her voice calm. I live here. I'm walking my dog. This is Charlie. We take the same walk every day. Officer Miller looked at her, then at the houses around them, then back at her. You live in this neighborhood? In one of these houses? There it was again. That tone, that disbelief. Yes, officer. That's my house right there. The one with the blue door and the flower pots on the front porch. You can see my car in the driveway. But Miller wasn't satisfied. Do you have any identification that proves you live there? And now Tamara had a choice. She could comply. Pull out her ID. Prove that she belonged. Make this easier. Make this go away. Or she could stand her ground. Why do I need identification to walk my dog on my own street? I'm in front of my own house. On a public sidewalk. What law requires me to show you ID for that? Miller shifted his weight. We've had reports of suspicious activity in the area. Tamara looked down at Charlie, still sitting, still wagging his tail. Suspicious activity? Like walking a friendly golden retriever in broad daylight. What exactly is suspicious about what I'm doing right now? I just need to verify your identity, ma'am. And I need you to tell me what law I violated that requires me to show you identification. I haven't committed a crime. I'm walking on a public sidewalk. In New York State, I'm not required to identify myself unless you have reasonable suspicion that I've committed a specific crime. So, what's your reasonable suspicion? Here's a question for you. Have you ever been stopped in your own neighborhood for no valid reason? Type yes or no in the comments below. Because what was happening to Tamara? It wasn't new to her. Officer Miller's hand moved to rest on his duty belt. A small gesture, but a threatening one. It's standard procedure when we receive calls about a suspicious person. No, it's not. You need reasonable suspicion that I've committed a crime. Walking a dog doesn't meet that standard. So what specific crime do you suspect me of committing? Ma'am, you're making this more difficult than it needs to be. And there it is, right? The shift. The blame. She's making it difficult. She's the problem. Not the system that assumes she doesn't belong. Not the neighbor who called the police on a woman walking a dog. Not the officer who can't articulate a single legal reason for this stop. No, she's difficult. I'm asserting my constitutional rights. That's not difficult. That's what we teach students in civics class. Fourth Amendment protects against unreasonable searches and seizures. You're detaining me right now. You need legal justification for that. Miller took a step closer. His body camera, yes, it was recording everything, captured the movement. Captured Tamara standing her ground. Captured Charlie looking between them, tail still wagging. What's your name? I don't have to tell you my name without reasonable suspicion of a crime. Refusing to identify yourself can be considered obstruction. No, officer, it can't. New York doesn't have a stop and identify statute. I'm only required to provide identification if you have reasonable suspicion that I've committed a specific crime. You haven't articulated any such suspicion. This is basic constitutional law. Miller hesitated. I received a report of a suspicious person in this neighborhood. Based on what specific information? What did this supposedly suspicious person do? Another pause. The body camera captured it. The caller reported seeing someone who didn't appear to belong in the neighborhood. Tamara let those words hang in the air. She wanted them recorded. She wanted them documented. Didn't appear to belong. And what about me makes you think I don't belong in this neighborhood, officer? What criteria are you using to determine who belongs and who doesn't? I didn't say you don't belong. But that's what the call said, isn't it? Someone saw me and decided I didn't look like I belonged here. So let me ask you directly. If I were white, would we be having this conversation right now? Miller's face flushed red. The camera caught it clearly. This isn't about race, ma'am. Then what is it about? Because I'm doing exactly what white residents in this neighborhood do every day. Walking their dogs, checking their mail, sitting on their porches. And nobody calls the police on them. But I do the exact same things. And I get the police called on me. I'm just doing my job, responding to calls. Your job is to investigate actual crimes, not to harass law-abiding citizens because someone had a racist reaction to seeing them. I pay property taxes here. I contribute to this community. I'm an educator. I serve on the neighborhood association board. I've lived here for 7 years. And I shouldn't have to justify my existence to you. And then Miller reached for his radio. This is Unit 23. I need backup at Willowbrook Drive in Maple. Uncooperative individual. Tamara's eyes widened. You're calling backup? Because a woman is walking her dog and declining to show ID when you have no legal basis to demand it. You're refusing to cooperate. That's escalating the situation. I'm asserting my constitutional rights. You're escalating by calling backup when there is no emergency, no crime, and no threat. Ma'am, I need you to calm down. I am calm. I'm also correct. And you calling for backup proves this was never about suspicious activity. This is about a black woman in a white neighborhood having the audacity to assert her rights. 2 minutes later, another patrol car pulled up. Officer Sandra Hayes stepped out. 43 years old, 12 years on the force. She'd worked in this area for 8 years. What's the situation, Miller? This woman is refusing to provide identification. We had a suspicious person call. She's being uncooperative. Hayes looked at Tamara carefully. She took in the comfortable clothes. The golden retriever sitting patiently. The house with the blue door behind them. And then her eyes widened. Dr. Wallace? Tamara nodded, relief flooding through her. Officer Hayes, yes? It's nice to see you again. Hayes turned to Miller, and there was something sharp in her expression now. This is Dr. Tamara Wallace. She's the principal at Northside High School. She's lived in that house for 7 years. I've attended community meetings at her home. Miller's face went pale. You know her? Everyone in this community knows her. She's on the neighborhood association board. She organizes the community block party. What is this call about? Tamara spoke before Miller could answer. Officer Miller received a call about a suspicious person. He saw me walking my dog and decided I must be that person. He demanded ID even though I explained I live here and haven't committed any crime. When I declined and asserted my Fourth Amendment rights, he called me uncooperative and called for backup. All of this is on his body camera. Hayes looked at Miller. Her voice had an edge now. Did you verify her address before demanding identification? I was investigating the call. By demanding ID instead of asking basic questions? Did you ask which house she lived in and verify it? She wouldn't cooperate. Hayes pulled out her radio. Dispatch, this is Unit 47. Cancel that backup request for Willowbrook and Maple. Situation is resolved. She turned to Tamara. Dr. Wallace, I apologize for this situation. This should not have happened. You're right, it shouldn't have. But this isn't the first time it's happened to me in this neighborhood. What do you mean? Hayes asked, and Tamara told her. This is the 4th time I've been stopped or questioned here since I moved in. The first time was 3 months after I moved in. I was checking my mailbox. A patrol car pulled up and an officer asked what I was doing. The second time was a year later. I was taking out my garbage cans. Another officer questioned me. The third time was 2 years ago. I was getting into my own car in my own driveway, and an officer asked if the vehicle belonged to me. I filed a formal complaint about that one. And now this. Fourth time in 7 years. Hayes's expression grew more serious. Did you file reports on all of these? The first 2 times I didn't. I didn't want to cause problems. The third time I filed a formal complaint, I never heard back. Nothing changed. So this time, I'm not letting it go. Miller finally spoke, his voice quieter now. Ma'am, if there was a misunderstanding, I apologize. Tamara looked directly at him, then at his body camera. This wasn't a misunderstanding. Your body camera recorded everything. From the moment you asked me what I was doing in this neighborhood, to demanding ID without reasonable suspicion, to calling me uncooperative, to calling for backup. All documented, so no. I don't accept your apology. I need your department to do better. Pause for a moment. Do you think Dr. Wallace should take legal action? Let me know in the comments. Because here's what happened next. Hayes pulled Miller aside. They walked a few steps away, but the body camera still captured their conversation. Do you understand who you just detained? Hayes asked, her voice low but firm. I do now. She's been principal at Northside for 4 years. She's won the State Educator of Excellence Award. She's respected throughout this county. She's lived here longer than you've been with the department. And you just treated her like a criminal on her own street because someone made a racist phone call. I have to respond to calls. You have to use judgment. You could have driven by and observed. You could have approached politely. You could have asked if she lived here and taken her word for it. You had a dozen options that didn't involve demanding ID and calling backup. While they talked, Tamara had pulled out her phone. She was typing rapidly. Dr. Wallace, Hayes said, walking back to her. I sincerely apologize. Tamara looked up from her phone. I'm emailing my attorney right now. I'm requesting all body camera footage from this encounter. I'm filing formal complaints with your department, with the county, with the State Attorney General's office, and with the Department of Justice. I'm also contacting the NWACP and the New York Civil Liberties Union, because this isn't just about me. This is about systemic racial profiling. That's your right, and I think you should pursue every avenue available. This needs to be addressed. Hayes looked at Miller. You're going to be placed on administrative duty. Return to the station and report to the watch commander immediately. Miller nodded, walked back to his patrol car. And Tamara? She looked down at Charlie. Come on, Charlie, let's go home. She walked the remaining distance to her house, unlocked her blue front door, went inside. And then she closed the door and leaned against it. Her hands were trembling now, not from fear, from rage, from exhaustion. From 7 years of proving she had the right to exist in her own neighborhood. She took several deep breaths. And then she called her attorney. The lawsuit was filed 6 weeks later. 52 pages, meticulously documented, citations, references to specific timestamps in the body camera footage. It alleged unlawful detention, racial profiling, violation of Fourth Amendment rights, violation of 14th Amendment equal protection rights, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. It named Officer Jason Miller individually. It named the Westchester County Police Department. It named the County of Westchester. And it demanded $1.8 million in damages. The county attorney's office reviewed the body camera footage. They watched Miller approach Tamara. They watched him demand ID without reasonable suspicion. They watched him call for backup when she asserted her rights. They watched the entire interaction. Then they reviewed the 3 previous incidents Tamara had mentioned. Footage they had never examined when she filed her earlier complaint. Footage that showed a clear pattern. They called an emergency meeting with the police chief and the county executive. This is a nightmare, the county attorney said. We have a decorated educator being harassed in her own neighborhood, repeatedly. We have documented evidence. We have a clear pattern of racial profiling. And we ignored her previous complaint. The police chief watched the footage again. This is indefensible. The county executive agreed. We settle fast and we make changes. But before settlement negotiations could begin, Tamara held a press conference. She stood on the courthouse steps with her attorney, the NAACP president, and ACLU representatives. She told her story. Calmly. Clearly. She showed clips from the body camera footage. She explained that this wasn't an isolated incident, but a pattern. The press conference was covered by local news, then regional, then national. The body camera footage went viral. Within 48 hours, it had been viewed over 12 million times. Within a week, over 40 million views. The hashtag #WalkingWhileBlack started trending. People across the country shared their own stories of being profiled in their own neighborhoods. The Westchester County Police Department opened an internal investigation. They reviewed not just Miller's conduct, but the department's response to Tamara's previous complaints. The investigation took 9 weeks. The findings were devastating. Miller had failed to use reasonable judgment. He had escalated unnecessarily. He had demonstrated bias in his approach and language. But worse, the department had failed to properly investigate Tamara's previous complaints. They had dismissed her concerns without reviewing evidence. They had allowed a pattern to continue unchecked. Officer Jason Miller was terminated 12 weeks after the incident. The termination letter cited multiple violations: unlawful detention, bias-based policing, failure to use appropriate judgment, and conduct unbecoming an officer. The 2 supervisors who had dismissed Tamara's previous complaints were also disciplined. One was demoted. One was suspended without pay for 30 days, and then the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division opened an investigation into the Westchester County Police Department. They found patterns of disparate treatment based on race in stops, detentions, and use of force. The department entered into a consent decree requiring comprehensive reforms: mandatory bias training, community oversight, data collection on all stops, regular review of body camera footage, and federal monitoring for 5 years. Tamara's lawsuit went to mediation 14 months after the incident. The county's opening offer? $600,000. Tamara's attorney countered with $2 million. They settled for $1,650,000. $1,650,000 for one dog walk. But here's what Tamara did with that money. She donated $300,000 to organizations working on criminal justice reform and racial equity. And she used the rest to establish a scholarship fund for students from underrepresented backgrounds pursuing careers in education. She turned her pain into purpose. Jason Miller? He never worked in law enforcement again. He moved to a different state, took a job in sales. He gave one interview to a local podcast, claiming he had been following his training and that political correctness had cost him his career. He learned nothing. But the system? The system changed. The body camera footage became required viewing at police academies across New York State. Law schools used it to teach about Fourth Amendment rights and racial profiling. Community organizations used it in Know Your Rights workshops. One dog walk led to a $1 million settlement, a terminated career, multiple disciplinary actions, and a federal consent decree. Tamara Wallace continued as principal of Northside High School. She continued her diversity and inclusion work. She continued living in her house with the blue door. But she installed security cameras around her property. She started carrying her phone with the recording app ready every time she left her house. She joined advocacy organizations working on police reform. In interviews, Tamara has said that what happened to her is a daily reality for Black Americans. Being questioned in spaces where we live and work. Being told we don't belong in places we've earned the right to occupy. Being treated as suspicious for simply existing while Black. That's why she fought back. That's why she made the footage public. That's why she donated to organizations working for change. Because individual accountability matters, but systemic reform is what creates lasting change. The body camera footage is still online. You can watch it yourself. You can see a school principal calmly explaining her constitutional rights while being unlawfully detained for walking her dog in front of her own house. You can see what racial profiling looks like when documented clearly. You can see the moment when Officer Hayes recognizes her and realizes the mistake. You can see what happens when someone refuses to accept being treated as suspicious. What's your biggest takeaway from this story? Drop it in the comments. And if this made you think about who gets questioned and who doesn't, about who has to prove they belong and who is automatically assumed to belong, make sure you subscribe, because this story matters. Tamara Wallace did everything society tells you to do. She got an education, not just a bachelor's, but a master's and a doctorate. She worked hard, not just 40 hours, but the countless extra hours educators put in. She achieved professional success, became a principal, improved outcomes for students. She bought a home in a safe neighborhood. She contributed to her community. She was financially stable and law-abiding, and none of it protected her from being stopped by police for walking her dog in front of her own house. None of it prevented neighbors from viewing her as suspicious. None of it guaranteed basic dignity and respect. She still had to prove she belonged in a neighborhood where she'd lived for 7 years and paid property taxes. She still had to assert her constitutional rights while standing on her own street. She still had to endure the humiliation of being detained in front of her neighbors. Think about what that means. Think about who gets questioned in their own neighborhoods and who never has to worry about it. Think about who has to carry identification to check their mailbox and who would find that absurd. Think about who is automatically assumed to belong and who constantly has to prove it. This story shows that achievement doesn't protect you from racism. Success doesn't make you immune to bias. A doctorate doesn't prevent someone from calling the police because they don't think you belong. But this story also shows that when violations are documented, when people refuse to stay silent, when evidence is undeniable, accountability is possible. Change can happen. Not every unlawful detention ends with justice. Not every complaint leads to reform. Not every person who experiences this has the resources or energy to fight back through the legal system. But Tamara did. And her fight resulted in accountability for the officer, a substantial settlement, and systemic reforms that will hopefully prevent this from happening to others. Every case that results in accountability makes the system incrementally better. Thanks for watching all the way through. If this opened your eyes to the reality of racial profiling, if it made you think about assumptions we make about who belongs where, share it with someone who needs to see it. Hit subscribe if you haven't already. Drop a comment below. Should the neighbor who made the racist call face consequences? What would real accountability look like? Because until we start having these conversations, until we start demanding better, stories like Tamara's will keep happening, and that's not acceptable. Thanks for listening, thanks for caring, and I'll see you in the next one.